Welcome to the Unitarian Society of New Haven. I am Lisa Anderson, your worship associate for today. My pronouns are she, hers. Let me extend a special welcome to all of you here for the first time. We're so glad you decided to join us. The email address for the membership team is on the screen, and we invite you to visit our website, usnh.org, to find out more about us. We are in our summer worship service period and are meeting electronically for now, but we're really looking forward to inviting you back to this beautiful sanctuary space this fall. We are very grateful to Melinda Tuhouse of the Green Sanctuary team for creating this service this morning and sharing her important social justice work. A special thank you as well to Rachel Wyan, Alex Chatfield, Tara Huska, and Big Win for joining us today. Let us acknowledge that we are gathered together on the ancestral lands of the Quinnipiac and other Native peoples. We commit ourselves to the action it takes to heal the wounds of the past and present in the ongoing work of reconciliation, love, and justice. I invite you to settle in to worship.
Good morning. My name is Melinda Tuhouse, and I'm a longtime member of USNH. Welcome to this journey to northern Minnesota, to Anishinaabe Treaty Lands, where water is everywhere and sacred wild rice grows on some of the 10,000 lakes the state is famous for. Welcome to the story of the fight to stop Line 3, a tar sands pipeline that is just like the Keystone XL pipeline that President Biden stopped. But with Indigenous people leading the way and many others following, we aim to stop them. The leaders of the Line 3 fight called us to come and stand with them, and I am very grateful and honored that we did. You'll meet two of them, Tara Huska and Big Wind, in this service.
We are diverse in faith, ethnicity, history, and spirituality, but aligned in our desire to practice our Unitarian Universalist faith in tangible ways. In the chalice lighting this morning, I lift up the seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all of existence of which we are a part.
My name is Tara Huska. I'm Bear Clan from Couchiching First Nation. This space that we're sitting in, Nemewug, the sturgeon that carries us all on their back, was formed back in 2018. The system is so deeply skewed against the people when it comes to protecting our interests. In this case, the interests in our land and water, and our interest in not violating the treaty rights of Indigenous people. And so, having learned the lessons of land defense and Standing Rock, I knew that this space would be needed, and I knew that building a community would be needed because it takes time to prepare people. But I did my best to pull together the networks of people that I knew and the people I knew locally to try to start building this community that we're in, with the intention of it being Indigenous women-led and Two-Spirit-led and youth-led. It's young people that are literally fighting for their futures, and that's what this space is. The removal of Anishinaabe that were down here and the forced closure into reservations was actually through cutting down the forests and killing all the sturgeon and cutting off the food sources, cutting off the wilderness from the people. So when this space was opened by matriarchs, the first moments that we were here, we prayed and we sang together and shared space, and it was really powerful. And then I was like, okay, well, it feels like this is starting to come together in a little bit different way. Some other really amazing land defenders have started to arrive, and they have networks, and now we're building out this community, and now this kind of like the word has gone out in a lot of different resistance circles about this space and what we're trying to create here, which is a inclusive, safe space for healing our connections to Earth and to each other, and also throwing down and stopping a pipeline together. And it seemed like building a space where leadership development, in addition to sovereign foods and spiritual healing and growth, was needed. We are at the point now where the line was unanimously approved in 2018. The conditions were set on the pipeline's construction, and full-on construction began at the end of November of last year in 2020. We're in so much water. There's so much water up here. It's incredible. There have been over 250 people arrested at this point, including myself. There have been multiple lawsuits brought against the state for approving like the Enbridge Line 3 project, against the feds for like the Army Corps of Engineers, right, like you were talking about. The state is actually suing itself. So Minnesota's Department of Commerce is suing Minnesota's Public Utility Commission for failing to, or for approving a certificate of need that didn't adequately prove its need. Those lawsuits are still working their way through. They're also joined by the White Earth Nation, the Red Lake Nation, and Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. So you got 3 different Ojibwe nations that are suing on this project against its approval. Enbridge keeps talking about how much it respects tribal nations, yet 3 of them are suing them. That's where all the legal sits. The direct action pieces, to me, are what propel and push the rest and help you get that meeting at the White House. We've had several different meetings, transition meetings, Biden transition team meetings with White House. We've had meetings with the White House that's currently sitting, with Department of the Interior, with the Army Corps of Engineers, with CEQ, the Council on Environmental Quality, where I used to clerk back when I was in law school. We wouldn't be getting those meetings if it weren't for all these people being arrested. There's no way. We wouldn't be getting national attention if there weren't people that were physically chaining themselves to the machines and climbing into the pipes. When we see that kind of heart and that kind of selflessness, I think as people it does something to you to see a young person especially that's literally fighting for their futures in real time. So the public pressure campaign has been very powerful.
I've been telling friends that on a scale of 1 to 10, my trip to northern Minnesota was a 3. That was for many reasons. The compatible group of elders with whom I traveled for 26 hours from Massachusetts and Connecticut to the resistance camps. The Indigenous women, 2 spirits who are gender fluid, gay, and trans youth in the camps, who are creating a new world even as they fight passionately against the extractive mentality and reality of the old world. Our visit to the headwaters of the Mississippi River, which for me was a very powerful spiritual experience. Our nonviolent direct action, for which we were arrested, spent a night in jail, and faced 3 misdemeanors we will pursue in Zoom court. And even the weather, which was cool, sunny, and calm every day we were there, and no mosquitoes. We stayed at an Airbnb near the Namaweg camp run by the GNU Collective, and on the first day, there was a decolonizing workshop led by several of the Indigenous folks in the camp. One of them defined decolonizing as, quote, realizing what we actually need, unquote, and living in harmony with nature, not taming and exploiting it. The action we did was blocking both entrances to a man camp, the temporary housing where pipeline workers who are not local, which is most of them, stay while building the pipeline. 11 of us locked down in 3 different ways, blocking the 2 access roads and stopping work for the day. The action was part of Awareness Week for murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and 2 spirits, as studies and anecdotal evidence show that violence skyrockets when these man camps are set up very near Indigenous communities. According to data from the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics, in cases of reported rape or sexual assault of Indigenous individuals, 82% of the perpetrators were white. Other studies look specifically at the rise in crime around man camps. Overall, Indigenous people experience per capita rates of violence that are more than twice those of the U.S. population as a whole. I was locked down with 4 other women elders from our affinity group, the Mayflies. As we got settled, Tara Hauska smudged us with burning sage in a brief but powerful ritual. Due to our concerns about hip, knee, and shoulder issues, we sat in lounge chairs locked down together through PVC pipes covered with tar and stones, yarn, and duct tape, and all of us connected with heavy gauge chains and padlocks. One of the most fun parts was when supporters began the chant, "What do we do when we're under attack? Stand up, fight back." And we chanted, "Sit down, fight back." Our affinity group also included 4 young people from the camp. The police came and efficiently deconstructed our paraphernalia, but it still took them a while. 2 other groups of 3 people each were locked down inside much bigger things, like concrete-filled barrels, which took several hours to break apart. In jail, we were given orange socks, underwear, pants, t-shirt, and sweatshirt, and sent to a room to strip, overseen by a female officer. We were treated humanely, more or less, and definitely benefited from our white and probably elder privilege. So who better to take action than us? When we were told we'd all be in separate cells, I was dreading the boredom to come until they offered each of us a book from the jail library. Hallelujah. I found a novel written by a Minnesota author that was pretty interesting. Peace Like a River. Too bad I didn't get to finish it. My 6 by 12 foot cell was clean and comfortable, which was another surprise, as usually jails are freezing. I had 2 long, narrow windows, just a few inches wide, that looked out on a pocket park with some tall evergreens and benches. I thought about how I would feel in that cell if it didn't have a window, and it wasn't a good feeling. We were arraigned the next morning and assigned Zoom court dates in June, and are being represented by a great movement lawyer. A few dozen folks from camp greeted us upon our release with food, coffee, and hugs all around. We were really pleased that the young people not only considered our frailties, but by the end, they also appreciated the decades of experience we brought with us. Later that day, our affinity group drove about an hour to the headwaters of the Mississippi, flowing out of Lake Itasca. We got there at sunset and were the only people there. You could feel the power in the spot, and the beauty was transcendent. I have goosebumps just thinking about it again and talking about it. We saw several places just a few miles downriver where Enbridge has done preliminary work to drill under the river, posting signs that read, quote, "sensitive wetland / water body," unquote, which seems like a good reason not to drill. This pipeline would despoil the land, water, and air, and contribute the equivalent of 50 coal-fired power plants to heat the climate. The next day, we headed to the Welcome Water Protectors Camp about 2 hours east, adjacent to the river. I interviewed several women, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, about their experiences fighting Line 3. On Sunday, we canoed in a Mother's Day / May Day action on the river. One of the Anishinaabe women described her vision of creating a space for folks to be in recovery from addiction to fossil fuels. And when we paddled down the river, they had hung 12 banners that drew on the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and other self-help recovery programs. We bid farewell to Anishinaabe territory Monday morning and did nothing but drive for the next 2 days with a hotel stop at midnight. Now we're trying to adjust to the, quote, real world back home, when I really think the world folks are building in the camps, in sync with nature, defined by commitment to each other and to their goals of Indigenous sovereignty and ending fossil fuel extraction, is the real world, or could be. A month after we went to northern Minnesota, a couple thousand people went there as part of the Treaty People gathering to carry out mass nonviolent actions against the construction of the pipeline. They were not treated by the police as gently as we were. The Indigenous leaders still need people to come and stand with them. We have to create the kind of visibility the successful 10-year fight against the Keystone XL pipeline generated. It's the same filthy bitumen from Alberta and the same destruction of Indigenous lands, the health and culture of the people who are impacted, and the climate. I find it tragically ironic that President Biden talks about the role of climate change in fueling wildfires, but then supports building Line 3, which will greatly exacerbate the climate crisis. His administration is championing the anti-science decisions made by the Trump administration in approving the pipeline, urging a court to throw out a challenge brought by tribal and environmental groups, which the court then did. Resistance is a muscle that gets stronger with use, and taking these small actions in the face of the monstrous injustices and threats to survival we all face becomes easier with repetition. This was a big trip involving significant time and money. The Indigenous leaders are still calling on people to go there, but there are many things you can do locally at less expense that would make essential contributions. I invite you to a conversation about climate justice.
Martin Luther King wrote, "All are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." The work of our community continues even when we are distant. We know that recent events have impacted us differently. If you are able, we urge you to give generously to our plate donation, which appears on the usnh.org homepage, and the plate donation is at the top. Please know that all are valued members of this community, regardless of their ability to contribute financially.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Wyan. I'm a longtime friend of Melinda's, and she's asked me to contribute to the service today. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts land, and I'm a member of St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Cambridge, where we have a ministry of study called Faith-Rooted Justice to begin to dismantle the system of white supremacy culture. Our group is led by African heritage members of our church. I'd like to begin today with a prayer to the Creator and to Mother Earth. Dear Creator and Mother Earth, I give thanks for the opportunity to be a part of the love and commitment to protect the sacred, knowing that the water and the earth are sacred gifts we must learn to treasure and prevent from being destroyed by greed and exploitation. It was an honor and a privilege to be part of the Mayflies affinity group from Massachusetts and Connecticut, and be welcomed in Minnesota at the Namawag camp of the GNU Collective, people who've been fighting the Enbridge Corporation from building Line 3 tar sands pipeline for at least the past 3 years. Upon arriving at camp, we were first asked to look at the need for decolonization, and I've begun the process. It is an everyday process. We need to continue it, to peel away the layers of conditioning that has us believing that our way of life is the only way to live. It was an honor to join with the Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people in leadership to plan and carry out the action to bring attention to the missing and murdered women, girls, and Two-Spirits by shutting down the man camp of Enbridge workers, locking ourselves down until we were arrested and held overnight in jail. A significant time for all of us to make this commitment to life and to the sacred water and land, to say no to the corporate and government forces that are determined to destroy the life, the headwaters, the source of the Mississippi River, just to provide dirty tar sands oil to keep going the machine of short-term profits and destruction of you, our Mother Earth. Thank you, Mother Earth. Dear friends who are listening today, the system we live in has numbed us to ignore the destruction of our very home. In spiritual terms, we know we are connected to the divine, to the Creator. When we're silent and open to prayer, we know we are one with all life and creation. And yet, our way of life in this country and most parts of the world, many, many parts of the world, has forced us to break with the covenant of our creation. Instead, we've become addicted to destruction because our way of life is dependent on fossil fuels. The headwaters of the Mississippi River is more than a metaphor for life. It is actually the source of the big river that has brought life to a huge part of North America for millennia, long before the European colonists took over this part of the world. The for-profit system has such power as to convince the climate president, Biden, to accept Line 3 as a fait accompli, which will end up poisoning and killing the sacred water and surrounding land and life. During the 24 hours in jail, my mind and heart took in the enormity of the forces destroying the very source of life of this amazing, beautiful river. Shortly after we were released, we made the pilgrimage to the state park that marks the source as the gentle stream of water flows down out of Lake Itasca. Here we are, the lake in the background and the stepping stones across and the water gently flowing. On our last day in Minnesota, we traveled a couple of hours south as the water continued to flow, and to the Honor the Earth Welcome Water Protector Center, where we paddled down this same river with banners at different points on the shore, teaching the process for recovery from fossil fuel addiction. These are the steps: honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, forgiveness, justice, perseverance, spiritual awareness, service. In June, many hundreds of new water protectors went to Minnesota to stop Enbridge from actually digging under the river. They locked down on machinery and on pipes and trying to stop the Enbridge workers, who are now in the process of removing over 4 billion gallons of water to make it possible to construct the pipeline. This at a time of record-breaking drought and heat. So right now we have to demand an environmental review, even though Biden has said it won't happen. In the Boston area, we joined with those in Minnesota, over 70 activists, including myself, on June 29th, occupied the Enbridge corporate offices in Waltham, reading a list of demands, including stop line 3 and shut down the Weymouth compressor station, which is a key part of the Atlantic Bridge fracked gas pipeline, also built by Enbridge. We walked in and filled the atrium with joyous music, chanting and singing, "No pipeline, no way." When the police arrived, 18 people continued their blockade of the office suite, prepared to be arrested, and remained throughout the night with supporters keeping watch outside the building. The next day, 3 were arrested. Our solidarity with Stop Line 3 can take place in Minnesota and wherever we are, putting pressure on the banks and on President Biden. Let's decolonize, protect the sacred, and heal from fossil fuel addiction. Love the Creator, respect all living beings, care for Mother Earth. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Alex Chatfield, and I live on occupied Massachusetts and Nipmuc land in what is now called Lincoln, Mass. I'm happy to join you today and to send my thanks to Melinda Tuhus, who asked me to record this video. As you may already know, I was one of the Mayflies, a group of 7 activists, including Melinda, who traveled to Minnesota in the first week of May. My wife, Trish, and I have 3 daughters in their early 20s, and over the past 10 years, we have all made climate activism a big part of our family identity. I am also a social worker and a member of our local Episcopal Church. I was privileged to grow up spending a lot of time in beautiful, unspoiled places near my home in southern Ohio and here in Maine. As a child, I took for granted that pristine and healthy ecosystems were places that I could enjoy. I began waking up to the reality of the climate crisis after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Volunteering with church members in Biloxi, Mississippi, we learned to connect warming temperatures in the Gulf to the destructive magnitude of that hurricane. Over the next busy decade, raising our kids, my worries about the climate problem continued to grow. In the fall of 2015, I joined my first campaign of civil disobedience resisting the construction of a high-pressure fracked gas pipeline in the community of West Roxbury, Mass. Little did I know then that 6 years later, I would still be involved in the fight against the same predatory, morally bankrupt corporation, Enbridge, which is building Line 3. The pipeline corridor crosses untouched wetlands and the treaty territory of Anishinaabe peoples through the Mississippi River headwaters to the shore of Lake Superior. The construction process does violence to those areas by draining billions of gallons of precious water and disrupting fragile ecosystems. The Mayflies came together in March of 2021 through networking among activists with connections to one another from prior actions and campaigns. Thanks to Zoom, we spent many hours hashing out travel plans, accommodations, and other logistics. The drive to Minnesota took 2 long days. We arrived on a Sunday afternoon in the small tourist town of Park Rapids, Minnesota, famous for proximity to the lake which is the source of the Mississippi River. It is lovely country with innumerable lakes, ponds, and streams, teeming with fish, birds, and other wildlife. Over the course of the following week, we were welcomed and hosted by the GNU Collective. Led by Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people, its members have been resisting Line 3 through legal advocacy and civil disobedience for several years. They live in the woods, in tents and campers, on private land, in conditions which have been at times harrowing. Think temperatures well below 0 in the winter, close by the construction route of the pipeline. Getting to know these courageous and loving people is an experience I will always cherish. They welcomed us, strangers, with hospitality and respect, and they invited us to reflect on our place and the place of our ancestors in the history of our country, which has seen the deliberate extermination of Native people and the extraction of resources from their stolen lands. As plans were made for our action, we were excited to learn that the intended target was a so-called man camp, a fenced compound for workers and heavy equipment. Man camps are epicenters for crimes, including sex trafficking of minors, drug abuse, and assaults against Indigenous women and girls. By 6:30 in the morning on Thursday, the mayflies and 4 other protectors were deployed and locked down in front of the man camp, blocking both gates to the facility and halting all traffic in and out. Besides our own bodies, we used 5 camp chairs, 4 lock boxes, a chain with padlocks, and 2 steel barrels filled with concrete that housed steel pipes. The extraction process consumed 6 hours. This delay allowed us to achieve our goal of preventing anyone in the camp getting work done on the pipeline for an entire day. Another fine example of white privilege in action. In the interest of time, I will spare people a description of our booking, the night we spent in jail, etc. There are legal cases to be resolved over time, but we are well represented and willing to face those consequences. The fight against Line 3 is emblematic of similar battles against extractive industries around the world, which are destroying the land and resources of Indigenous people. By raising the profile of the Line 3 resistance, we seek to hold the Biden administration and other civic leaders accountable for their promises to protect the climate. We need people like you to join this effort in the coming months and years. Thank you.
We are at the time of our service when we open our hearts to the joys and sorrows of our community, near and wide. We will follow joys and sorrows today with a guided meditation focused on our connection to our planet Earth. Some in our community are holding a joy or a deep sorrow, so deep it must be shared. If you are one such person, feel free to share it in our chat feature. Anna Leela Williams and Kathy Gould share a deep sorrow. Their beloved friend, Joan Alfiero, died peacefully at home on Sunday, July 11th, after a 2.5-year battle with ALS. Please hold Joan's family and loved ones in your hearts. I want to lift up the turmoil and grief in Haiti and hold our dear neighbors there in our prayers and thoughts. For all the spoken and unspoken joys and sorrows, let us hold each other and send love and care. I invite you now to settle into your chairs. Feel the earth below you, holding you up, sustaining you, and giving life. Close your eyes if you like, or gaze softly down. Let us consider the question of how humans arrived on this planet. What is your creation story? People, since the beginning of time, have created powerful stories around creation. Consider the story or stories in Genesis you may have learned as a child. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void and darkness covered the face of the deep. After God created water and land, put forth vegetation and animals on the earth, God made humankind in his likeness and let them have dominion, to have control over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. Has this version of creation shaped your relationship with all other sentient beings and life that forms planet Earth? Indigenous people have their own creation stories, which are quite different. Consider the Sky Woman story, which appears in various versions throughout our North American continent. Sky Woman fell like a maple seed, pirouetting on an autumn breeze through a column of light streamed from a hole in the sky world, making her path where only darkness had been before. In the emptiness, there were many eyes gazing up at the sun shaft of light. The eyes belonged to the geese and other animals who nodded to one another and gathered to decide what to do, since there was only water and no land. Resting in the wings of the geese, Sky Woman saw them all: loons, otters, swans, beavers, fish of all kinds. A great turtle offered his back for her, while the others dove through the water in search of mud, which would form the earth on which she was to live. Moved by the extraordinary gifts of the animals, Sky Woman danced and sang in thanksgiving. The earth grew from the alchemy of all the animals' gifts, coupled with deep gratitude. How does your body feel after hearing the Sky Woman version of creation? Botanist Robin Wald Kimmerer suggests that unlike the Genesis stories, images of Sky Woman speak not just of where we come from, but also of how we can go forward. Let us hold silence together. Amen, and blessed be.
I feel like there wasn't a time in my life where I haven't been fighting these extractive processes and colonialism and a lot of the assimilation practices that are pushed upon us. And so at a very young age, seeing the inequalities within my own community, growing up in a housing project that was right in front of a fracking and oil drilling site. And the river and the creeks that we played in, I didn't recognize at the time were being used for mixing and dilution of the chemicals that are used to process natural gas, fracking, and oil. And because of that, I started to see a lot of the impacts that it was having on the people around me. Half of my reservation knows people who have cancer in their families. I've had multiple friends and family members pass away from rare cancers in my community, and the average life expectancy is 48. And a lot of it has to do with the environmental racism that we have faced for hundreds and hundreds of years, the colonial practices that have been utilized in that area. I come from what they would consider an oil and gas tribe. Since the creation of Wyoming as a state, it's known as the energy capital of the world, and they were stealing it from us before we were even getting a piece of the pie. And so I think that it did make sense at one point when we didn't understand the ecological and climate impacts that would happen from these extractive processes, that we would, want to take care of ourselves and want what was, owed to us. But now we're in this precipice of time where we recognize, from the latest climate science and from the traditional ecological knowledge that this land is sick, all of it, everywhere. And so I've spent, a great deal of my life trying to figure out how I play into the grand scheme of not only the environmental degradation that is continuously happening, but the larger impact it has on our environment and the climate. I'm a water protector who's fighting in the front lines with ordinary people just like you, because we understand one thing: we cannot ensure the health and well-being for future generations if we don't take action. And after I beat my cases in Standing Rock, Nemewug, the camp that we're at right now, was opened up, and I came here a week after that, after it had opened. In the summer of 2018, we thought it was now then. And because of a lot of things, because of the regulatory processes and the permits that were needed, there was a lot of overwhelming opposition against this pipeline, through over 300,000 people, telling the president that they didn't want this pipeline to go through. And you have, over 80,000 comments that were given to the Public Utility Commission, and over 95% of them were in opposition. And so you have a lot of pushback from tribal leaders, tribal organizations, and environmentalists all over the United States and world telling people that we do not need to expand the Line 3 pipeline. And that's why I'm out here. I am accountable to the indigenous matriarchs, femmes, and two-spirits that opened up this place. And as a person who identifies as a two-spirit person, I embody both masculine and feminine energy, and there is a role for us in our communities. People ask me, what does it mean to be a water protector? And I think, for me, we never choose to love water. We are born in sacred water when we're in the womb, and water remembers us, and we remember it, and we understand, that it is vital to all living things. If you do not drink water for 4 days, you will die. And all of that's up jeopardy up here in northern Minnesota. And it's not just going to affect the people here in northern Minnesota. It is going to affect everyone downstream. We have an obligation up here to stop this pipeline and to continuously stop these projects that are going to keep coming up in the next upcoming years.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth, community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
As we end this time together, let's think about what this means for us. We all have a part to play in the fight to preserve life on Earth from climate chaos, if we choose to play it. And as Rebecca Solnit says, resistance is usually portrayed as a duty, but it can be a pleasure, an education, a revelation. Amen and blessed be.
Love of my life, I'm crying, I am not dying, I am dancing, dancing along in the madness. There is no sadness, only a song of the soul, and we'll sing this song. Why don't you sing along, and we can sing for a long, long time. Why don't you sing this song? Why don't you sing along, and we can sing for a long, long time. Are you forgiving, giving shelter? Follow your heart, love will find you. Truth will unbind you. Seek out a song of the soul.